So what I'm talking about really is a part of the, I mean, the Montauk project went on for many, many years, and I believe it was all to do with trapping. Well, they put it out as to do with trapping souls, which is in itself a big, big thing to get into, because there's a lot of misinformation and bullshit around these kind of subjects. So on part of the Montauk project, the military tried to break into the ether. I believe they talking about into fields, into magnetic fields, breaking into magnetic fields like a bumblebee does, like I explained. So what the Montauk project was trying to do the same thing through frequencies. So what they did is while I was all in this ship, you know, Navy ship, and they allegedly the story is that they transformed themselves into fields, into these magnetic fields, i.e. the ether. I'm saying the ether because it's the only explanation that could work. So what they said that happened, and this military guy that I've got, which it looks like it was done in the 80s or 90s, the interview. Maybe the late 80s, because the video work or the camera work that's been seen looks very similar to stuff that was done in the 90s, like so 90s camera work. So what the guy was saying is that they broke into fields and they tried to transport themselves. This is the this is the bit that I think there's a lot of misinformation. There's no proof of it. Just, you know, whistleblowers talking about this kind of stuff. But they're saying what they did, they tried to break themselves into a field. Other people may say, oh, they were trying to dive into a different dimension where the souls can be trapped, so the souls are actually moving on this certain frequency of fields. So it's been proven that the ether can be broken into. It's been proven that the ether is actually there. But to actually take a physical object like a Navy ship and its crew to put it into, try and transport it physically into the ether and then back into a physical matter again, that's something completely, well, out of my way of thinking and proving. I can't prove any of that. To put something into certain fields and to crack electricity and sparks and things like this, which many insects and that do. We know this for fact, so we know that they do this. But to physically take a Navy ship and the crew to do it. So anyway, so what they say had happened, that when they tried to transport themselves back into this reality, this physical matter of reality, is that the Navy ship and its crew got stuck in between the fields. They got stuck in between the ether.
That every individual, when they are born, actually going back to the conception, which is a time when the fetus, in a certain sense, is born, it comes into creation, when the egg splits and starts to develop, there's a set of time locks placed on that developing fetus, which locks it to this time stream. Actually, it is not the fetus which is concerned with the lock, it is the soul, which comes to that body and has a lock placed on that body, so it then flows with time as we know it. And is locked to that time period. Your date is December 31st, 1919, or whatever it may be. You go back about 9 months from that date where you were conceived, that's when the lock was placed on there. And those locks remain with you for the rest of your life until you die or something disrupts them.
Right, hi there. My name is Electric Johnny Hat. Hope you're all well. It is the 1st of May today, so officially coming into summer. Around this time, but it's incredibly warm. It's around 12 o'clock, 12 midday. Yeah, 1st of May. Just a couple of things really. I mean, one talk I want to do, so I want to do 2 talks today. One talk is on the Montauk project, which I've been researching behind the scenes, as I do. So I know when I start talking about stuff, people jump on it. So I want to talk about the Montauk project today, at some point today. what led me to start looking in and researching this is there's a video being leaked on we've got leaks on Facebook, like a lot of stuff gets leaked on Facebook, and it gets taken down pretty much straight away, so you've got to be really quick. I said that about Facebook before. You can find some really good science and information on there. You won't find that kind of information on Instagram or TikTok, YouTube. You won't find it. Especially information on the Montauk project, where you're hearing firsthand of the military people that were sort of doing, or should we say, had the most information, the correct. You'd like to think the correct information. I tend to believe, because a lot of this stuff does get hidden. You think, well, how do you know if it's correct, Johnny? Well, it's coming first hand from one of the guys. That was talked about I don't know, it was basically talked about in the 90s. And he talks openly and generally. It's not like a video you see on YouTube. You can pretty much see it's faked, and the surroundings of where the guys talked on, you know, it's faked. You get a lot of stuff like that on the UFO and alien information, you know, going back sort of 10 years ago, 20 years ago. You can see what's fake and what's not. You only got to do your research on that stuff to find out. And it does it, I mean, because all this stuff happened around, you know, the same time of early information on UFO and aliens and stuff like that, which I've done loads of research and don't believe a word of it. It's just a ruse for other stuff that's going on, other information that's trying to be hidden, you know. So I found an interview, part of an interview, it's not the whole interview, but part of an interview of a guy talking about it in depth of the Montauk project. So I'm just going to give you a summary right now, because I'm not talking about it till later. There's other stuff I want to talk about. And basically, you know, the thing I want to talk about is, on the Montauk project, is, well, they talk about trapping souls and things like that. How can you trap a soul? I think there's only one way you can trap souls, and that's in the ether. That's through the ether, through the fields that are in the ether. So you're breaking into a field and you're in the ether. And we know how that kind of in general works, because insects do it all the time. There's many things out there that can do it, but we personally can't do it. Not in the respect that, look, if you look at bumblebees, the way bumblebees break their magnetic fields, and then they end up using their own magnetic field as a bubble. So a bee will put itself into a bubble, of a magnetic bubble it's created itself, and it stays literally in this bubble itself. So now the bee can move around freely. It's magnetics. But bees they've been intelligently designed for that. A human hasn't. So we have to do it in other ways. I'm not saying that the ether can't be broken in that kind of way, because it can, and we know it can, because it's used on a day-to-day basis by military and places, people like that. But to try and put yourself into a magnetic bubble that you have to create yourself somehow through a frequency, of jumping through a field into this magnetic, we call magnetic ether. So what I'm talking about really is a part of the Montauk project went on for many, many years, and I believe it was all to do with trapping. Well, they put it out as to do with trapping souls, which is in itself a big thing to get into, because there's a lot of misinformation and bullshit around these kind of subjects. So on part of the Montauk project, the military tried to break into the ether. I believe they talking about into fields, into magnetic fields, breaking into magnetic fields like a bumblebee does, like I explained. So what the Montauk project was trying to do the same thing through frequencies. So what they did is while I was all in this ship, you know, Navy ship, and allegedly the story is that they transform themselves into fields, into these magnetic fields, i.e. the ether. I'm saying the ether because it's the only explanation that could work. So what they said that happened, and this military guy that I've got, which it looks like it was done in the 80s or 90s, the interview. Maybe the late 80s, because the video work or the camera work that's been seen looks very similar to stuff that was done in the 90s, like so 90s camera work. So what they're saying, the guy was saying, is that they broke into fields and they try to transport themselves. This is the this is the bit that I think there's a lot of misinformation. There's no proof of it. Just, you know, whistleblowers talking about this kind of stuff. But they're saying what they did, they tried to break themselves into a field. Other people may say, oh, they were trying to dive into a different dimension where the souls can be trapped, so the souls are actually moving on this certain frequency of fields. So if you, look, I believe there's two, just going off topic quickly, there's obviously two kind of main fields, and that's the physical field we're in, which, you know, you can mess around with the soul, the afterlife, whatever you want to call it, but we can sort of kind of control it in this physical dimension that we're in. And you've got the other dimension, which is the spiritual, the soul dimension, i.e. when you pass. But people say that they can break into that, you know, all very crazy things to say. So what the guy was talking about was, and it's been well documented over the years that people have followed the Montauk project, that they managed to push the actual physical ship itself and the physical person or physical military people from the Navy to transfer into this other, into this separate field. And what happened is they tried to transport stuff back. So basically the ship, the Navy ship with its crew, got trapped in between the two dimensions or the two fields. I mean, people like to say dimensions, but it's basically fields, or breaking through into the ether. So what they're saying is they try to transport themselves through into the ether. I don't think they're ever going to mention the way I'm saying it, which is the ether. They're always going to mention fields, because they're not allowed to mention the ether, because a lot of people, as we know, from so-called mainstream, still deny the ether. So in them days they talked about fields. They weren't allowed, I don't believe, or they wanted to openly talk about the ether itself. Now the bee can break itself into the ether quite easily, because it's engineered to do that. It's a we want to call it a God's creation, whatever. But the bee can do it. It can jump in and out of that ether whenever it wants. We know we can break the ether through electricity, things like that. So back to the Montauk project. So they're saying that they jumped in to another dimension. They're calling it fields. I'm calling it the ether because it's the only thing they can explain. So let's just say hypothetically, we put it that way, that they actually try to physically move the Navy ship and its crew into a field, so breaking into the ether. But now the story is, the main story is that as they try to transport things backwards and forwards into the ether, I don't think they physically put themselves into another dimension or into the ether, or managed to put themselves into the ether and to not be seen. I don't think that's ever going to be possible to do something like that, because you're talking about physical matter, and turning that physical matter into a lighting system, or if you want to call it the soul, and put themselves into that. You know, if we could physically put ourselves into the ether, which we can't, we can do it through electricity and stuff like that. We can break into the ether. That's been done many times. Eric Dollard's done it for many years. So it's been proven that the ether can be broken into. It's been proven that the ether is actually there. but to actually take a physical object like a Navy ship and its crew to put it into, try and transport it physically into the ether and then back into a physical matter again, that's something completely, well, out of my way of thinking and proving. I can't prove any of that. To put something into certain fields and to crack electricity and sparks and things like this, which many insects and that do. We know this for fact, so we know that they do this. But to physically take a Navy ship and the crew to do it. So anyway, so what they say had happened, that when they tried to transport themselves back into this reality, this physical matter of reality, is that the Navy ship and its crew got stuck in between the fields. They got stuck in between the ether. So they're saying that they tried to manage to, I'm not saying that this is true or factual, I'm not saying anything. If anything, I'd say it's false, just like the alien thing. But I'm not saying that the ether is false, because the ether is true. But there's only certain things that it's been engineered to do things like that, by jumping in and out of the ether to create magnetic bubbles. Now we know the fields are, in my eyes, the fields are just the ether, because everything runs in the ether. All faults, I've been doing research, on faults and stuff like that. Our faults are not our own. Our faults are something that lays in the ether, that can be transferred through different magnetic fields. There's fields all around us. I've been doing loads of research on this. I hope you've been following. The man of common sense and logical reason. So they're saying, the whistleblowers have been saying for years and still say this to this day. The video I've got with a guy in the Navy that's explaining this in the 90s is just a more up-to-date version, or being better explained to the public itself. So they're saying that they jumped into the magnetic fields, which is the ether, and they got trapped in between the lighting system and the physical matter itself. Now we have two things. We have a physical matter and we have a soul, or a spirit. I believe it's all the same thing anyway. Soul and spirit, all the same thing. Got no reason to deny that they're anything else, that they are two separate things. So they're saying that when they tried to transport the ship back again with its crew, that it got caught in between the fields, in between the magnetic fields, in between the field that we call the ether, the main fields that we call the ether itself. That has all logical reason. And you see pictures of the main Navy ship and its crew, where some parts of the crew got caught in between dimensions in the ship, so there was actually part of their body was still stuck in the ether, and the other part of the body, i.e. like legs or arms, were actually hanging out of the ship. So half of their body was allegedly inside the field, the ether, and the rest of the physical body of their matter was hanging out of the airship, out of the Navy ship itself. So in some parts of the Navy ship, when they allegedly brought it back from the ether, from the fields, the magnetic fields, you might see an arm, you might see a couple of legs that seems to be split into, or manifested actually into, the Navy ship itself. So you can imagine going onto a Navy ship now and seeing physical matter hanging out of this Navy ship, part of the walls of the Navy ship. So part of their body on the inside of the ether, it doesn't matter what direction, it's all directions, it's the ether, and the rest of the physical body, parts of limbs, whatever, even half of body hanging out of the ship itself, the Navy ship, because the rest was actually in the ether, and the rest of the physical matter of the crew were hanging out of the ship's walls, basically, the ship's decks, whatever. So I want to do a more, I've got loads of information on that because I've been researching it. So I like to come back and have a chat about that, about the Montauk project and that. But the Montauk project in general, you know, was about manipulating these fields. They did the same kind of thing in the building that, you know, where they was doing these projects like the Montauk projects in actual military bases themselves. And they say even to this day the building even to this day is very, very eerie because of the trapped souls that have been left inside the military bases that they were using. You can go on YouTube, and I'm sure you could still probably track down stuff on YouTube or other platforms, of finding out of what they were actually doing in the military bases concerning the Montauk project. So they basically just they'd done their experiments in the military bases and then took their information of research and then put it into practice on a Navy airship and its crew, like I say, which basically got trapped in between the fields of basically what I'm saying, the ether itself, which is, if true, mind-blowing. Do I believe it's true? No. No. There's no proof of it. Only documentation from the military themselves. But it doesn't mean that I don't want to, you know, it's going to stop me from coming on talking about something like that, because it's something that's been going on or been talked about, and for many, many years, and even to this day we still haven't got to the bottom of it, because I don't believe it's something that you can get to the bottom of. So before I go, last thing I'm going to say is, like I say, like things like insects like bumblebees and beetles that can break themselves into the ether and make a magnetic bubble around themselves, which is just a part of the ether. They've now transported themselves into the ether, but these are insects. They are engineered by the creator, God, whoever you want to call it, the mainframe that has manufactured these insects to be able to naturally to break into the ether themselves. But we have not been engineered to do something like that. So to believe a story like the Montauk project is it's a crazy thing to believe in. But hey, my name's Electric Johnny Hat, and I like to look into things sensibly, logically, with common sense. If it can't be proven properly, then how the hell can anyone take it as factual? You know? The Montauk project. Still researching it, gonna come back and do a long talk on it. But hopefully you can get some ideas and information of what I've been saying today. Yeah.